This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. The first voice came through my bedroom wall at 2:14 a.m. on December 12th. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when it woke me up. The temperature outside was -15 degrees Fahrenheit. My apartment was on the 7th floor of an old building in downtown Chicago. I sat up in bed. A man and woman were arguing next door. Their words were muffled but clear enough to make out most of what they were saying. Something about money, about betrayal, normal neighbor drama that shouldn't have concerned me. I pressed my ear against the wall. The drywall was ice cold. The voices grew clearer, like someone had turned up the volume. The man was shouting now. "You can't keep doing this," he yelled. The woman's response was softer, almost a whisper. I knocked on the wall 3 times. "Keep it down," I called out. The voices stopped instantly. I lay back down, pulled my blanket up to my chin. The heating in the building wasn't great, and I could see my breath in the dim light from the street lamp outside. Sleep came eventually. The next night, same time, the voices returned. This time they weren't arguing. They were having a normal conversation about everyday things. Weather, TV shows, what to have for dinner. I pressed my ear to the wall again. The cold from the drywall seemed to seep into my skull. "The snow is really coming down tonight," the woman said. "Just like that night," the man replied. "Remember?" I knocked again. No response this time, but the voices continued. "Someone's listening," the woman said. "Let them," replied the man. "They should hear this." I got up and put on my slippers. Time to go next door and sort this out properly. The hallway was dark and silent. The emergency exit sign at the end cast a red glow on the worn carpet. I counted 3 doors down to apartment 7D and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. The door vibrated slightly under my knuckles. A young couple walked past me, heading toward the elevator. "Excuse me," I called out to them. "Do you know the people who live here?" The woman shook her head. "That apartment's been empty since summer. The last tenants moved out in July." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure? I've been hearing voices through the wall." "Definitely empty," the man said. "We're on the condo board. There was water damage they had to fix. No one's lived there for months." I went back to my apartment. The voices were gone. I turned on all the lights and checked every room. Nothing unusual. Just the normal creaks and groans of an old building settling. The 3rd night, they knew my name. "David is awake," the woman said. "Aren't you, David?" I froze in my bed. I hadn't told anyone in the building my name. I'd only moved in 2 months ago and kept to myself. "He works in software development," the man said. "Moved here from Boston after the divorce. Still misses Sarah sometimes, don't you, David?" My hands were shaking. I hadn't told anyone about Sarah. "Remember what she said that last night?" the woman asked. "When she found the messages on your phone?" "Stop it," I whispered. "I gave you everything," the man quoted, mimicking Sarah's voice perfectly. "And this is how you repay me?" I jumped out of bed and pressed my face against the wall. "Who are you? How do you know these things?" "We know everything about you, David," the woman said. Her voice was closer now, like she was standing right on the other side of the wall. "We've been watching you since you moved in. What do you want?" "We want you to understand," the man said, "to see what happens when trust is broken, when promises mean nothing." I grabbed my coat and shoes. I needed to get out of there. The voices followed me as I moved through the apartment. "Running won't help," they said in unison. "We'll be here when you get back." I ran down 7 flights of stairs, not trusting the elevator. The lobby was empty. Outside, snow was falling heavily. The street was deserted, street's lights creating halos in the swirling white. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the fresh snow, leading from nowhere directly to my bedroom window. 7 stories up. No other marks, no signs of a ladder or climbing equipment. Just single-file footprints appearing out of thin air. I walked backward, keeping my eyes on the building. More footprints were appearing in the snow, one after another, leading toward me. No feet making them, just impressions appearing in the virgin snow, getting closer. I ran. The temperature was well below 0, and my lungs burned with each breath. I didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour diner 6 blocks away. I sat in a booth, ordered coffee, and waited for sunrise. When I finally returned to my apartment, the voices were waiting. But they weren't coming from the wall anymore. They were coming from inside my bedroom. "Welcome back, David," they said as I opened the door. The room was freezing. Frost covered the windows from the inside. My breath came out in thick white clouds. They stood by the window, a man and woman dressed in clothes from another era. Their skin was blue-white, like people who had been out in the cold too long. Their eyes were the color of ice. "You shouldn't have cheated on her, David," the woman said. "Actions have consequences," the man added. They took a step toward me. Their feet left wet prints on the carpet, but the prints froze instantly. I backed away. "This isn't real. You're not real." "We're as real as guilt," the woman said. "As real as betrayal. As real as the cold," the man finished. They reached for me with fingers like icicles. The temperature in the room dropped even further. I could feel the moisture in my eyes starting to freeze. I turned and ran, but the voices followed. They echo in my head even now as I write this from a motel 50 miles away. They whisper about Sarah, about trust, about consequences, about the cold that's slowly spreading through my body, starting from my heart. The snow is falling outside my motel window. There are footprints appearing in it, leading to my door. The room is getting colder. They're coming, and this time I don't think I can run. The digital clock on my desk showed 11:42 p.m. when I finally finished the end-of-year reports. Outside my office window on the 32nd floor, Chicago was disappearing under the heaviest snowfall of the season. The weather alert on my phone warned of dangerous conditions, with accumulations of up to 18 inches expected by morning. I shut down my computer and gathered my things. The office was silent except for the hum of the heating system. Everyone else had left hours ago, trying to beat the storm. I'd stayed behind to finish the reports due before the holiday break. Now I just wanted to get home. The elevator dinged as soon as I pressed the down button. The doors opened with their familiar hydraulic whisper. Empty. Not surprising at this hour. I stepped in and pressed L for lobby. The descent started normally. Floor 32, 31, 30. I checked my phone, scrolling through weather updates. The elevator stopped at floor 28. The doors opened to an empty hallway. No one was there. I frowned. These were law offices, closed at this hour. The doors closed and we continued down. Floor 27, another stop. Doors opening to another empty hallway. "Come on," I muttered, pressing L again. Nothing changed. Floor 26, stop, open, empty. Floor 25, same thing. My phone showed no signal now. The elevator continued its strange pattern, stopping at every floor. The lights flickered briefly at floor 20. Floor 19, the elevator shuddered as it stopped. When the doors opened, the hallway was dark. The emergency lights cast a weak glow on walls covered in frost. The air that rushed in was freezing. I jabbed the door close button repeatedly. Nothing happened. The cold air filled the elevator cab. My breath came out in white clouds. Floor 18. The digital display showed the number clearly, but when the doors opened, the sign on the wall read, Floor B7. That wasn't possible. The building only had 3 basement levels. The hallway stretched out before me, covered in a thin layer of snow. The emergency lights reflected off ice-covered walls. No windows, no doors, just an endless corridor disappearing into darkness. I pressed every button on the panel. Nothing responded. The doors remained open, letting in more frigid air. A sound echoed from the dark hallway. Footsteps crunching in snow, getting closer. I pressed myself against the back wall of the elevator. The footsteps grew louder. Still no one visible in the dim light. The doors finally closed. My legs were shaking. The elevator resumed its descent. Floor 17. The display blinked and changed to floor D5. The doors opened to another snow-filled corridor, different from the last one. This one had doors, all frozen shut with thick ice. Something moved at the end of the hallway, a shadow passing between the emergency lights. The doors closed before I could see it clearly. Floor 16 became level M. Floor 15 was sub-level X. Each stop revealed impossible spaces, frozen landscapes where office hallways should have been. Some had windows showing nothing but swirling snow against pitch-black sky. Others were completely enclosed, like underground bunkers encased in ice. At level Q, I saw the footprints. They led from the dark end of the corridor directly to the elevator doors. Fresh prints in pristine snow, getting closer with each floor. The elevator's lights flickered more frequently now. The temperature inside the cab dropped steadily. Frost formed on the metal walls. "Please," I whispered, pressing L again and again. "Please just take me to the lobby." The display showed floor 0. The doors opened to reveal the lobby. Relief flooded through me until I really looked at it. The massive space was filled with snowdrifts. Ice covered the revolving doors and floor-to-ceiling windows. The security desk was empty, covered in frost. The only light came from emergency signs, their red glow reflecting off the ice-covered surfaces. Footprints led from the elevator to the security desk. They looked fresh. The doors tried to close but stuck halfway. Cold wind whipped through the gap, carrying snowflakes. I could see my car in the parking lot through the frozen windows, just 50 feet away. I took a deep breath and stepped out. The snow was ankle-deep, untouched except for those single footprints. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Movement caught my eye. Someone was sitting at the security desk, a figure in a guard's uniform, head down. "Hello?" My voice echoed in the frozen space. "Can you help me?" The figure raised its head slowly. In the red emergency light, its skin was blue-white. Frost covered its uniform. When it opened its eyes, they were solid white, like frozen pearls. It stood up. Ice cracked and fell from its joints. I ran. The main doors were frozen shut. I sprinted for the emergency exit, my feet slipping on the icy floor. Behind me, slow footsteps crunched in the snow. The emergency door opened with a crack of breaking ice. I burst into the storm. Wind-driven snow stung my face. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine started on the first try. I pulled out of the parking lot, tires spinning in the snow. In my rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing in the emergency exit, watching me drive away. I didn't stop until I was home, hands shaking as I unlocked my apartment door. The TV news showed that the building had lost power due to the storm. All elevators were shut down. No one could have been operating them. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice, distorted like it was coming through ice. "You forgot to sign the reports." I looked at my caller ID. It showed floor 0. The temperature in my apartment dropped suddenly. Frost began forming on my windows. Behind me, the elevator doors in my building's hallway dinged. They were about to open. The first letter arrived on December 15th at 6:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because I just checked my phone after a long walk in the snow. My boots were wet, my fingers were numb, and all I wanted was to get inside my apartment and warm up. The envelope lay on the welcome mat, pristine white against the dark fabric. No stamps, no return address, just my name written in neat black handwriting. Michael Cooper. I picked it up. The paper was cold and slightly damp, as if it had been outside in the snow. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in plain Times New Roman font. Today you left your apartment at 8:15 a.m. wearing your gray wool coat and red scarf. You walked to the train station on Oak Street, stopping at Rosie's coffee shop for a large Americano with an extra shot. You sat by the window and watched the snow fall for 17 minutes. At work, you had 2 meetings. During lunch, you ate the sandwich you packed, turkey with provolone on rye bread. At 2:30 p.m., you took a personal call in the stairwell. You told Sarah you couldn't make it to Christmas dinner this year. After work, you walked home instead of taking the train. You stopped 3 times to warm up, once at the bookstore on 7th Street, once at the public library, and once at the convenience store where you bought a pack of mint gum. You arrived home at 6:43 p.m. Welcome back, Michael. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I checked the hallway. Empty. The security camera at the end of the corridor was dark. It had been broken for months. I locked my door, all 3 locks, and called the building manager. "No, nobody's turned in any letters," he said. "The front desk hasn't seen anyone unusual. Want me to check the cameras in the lobby?" I said yes. He called back 20 minutes later. "Nothing strange on the footage, just regular residents coming and going. Are you sure someone didn't just slip it under your door earlier?" But they couldn't have. Every detail was correct, down to the exact minute I got home. The second letter arrived the next day. Same spot on the welcome mat, same plain envelope. "You overslept this morning. Your alarm went off at 7 a.m., but you hit snooze twice. You skipped breakfast and ran to catch the 8:27 train. The woman in the red coat noticed you dropped your glove. She picked it up, but you were already gone. At lunch, you searched online for how to tell if someone is following you and legal requirements for restraining orders. Your hands were shaking so much you had to retype your password 3 times. You left work early at 3:45 p.m. You took a different route home. You looked over your shoulder 47 times. We counted. The police officer at the station was named Rodriguez. He told you they couldn't do anything without evidence of a threat. He suggested installing security cameras. You bought 3 cameras at Best Buy. They're still in the bag by your door. Don't bother installing them. We'll see you anyway. I called Sarah. She came over and helped me install the cameras. 1 pointing at the welcome mat, 1 covering the hallway, 1 watching the window. The 3rd letter was waiting the next morning. The cameras showed nothing. No footage was missing. No glitches. The envelope simply appeared between 1 frame and the next. The cameras won't help, Michael. You can't record what isn't there. You tossed and turned all night. At 3:17 a.m., you got up and checked all the locks again. You stood at the window for 23 minutes watching the snow fall. Sarah slept on your couch. She's worried about you. She thinks you should come to Christmas dinner after all. Family is important, she said, especially now. She's right. You shouldn't be alone, but you already are. I took the letters to the police station. Different officer this time. Same response. No threats, no crime. Could be a prank. Install cameras. File a report if anything happens. The fourth letter came with a photograph. Me, sleeping in my bed the night before. The angle was from the ceiling, looking down. You talk in your sleep, Michael. Last night you said her name 7 times. We know why you don't want to go to Christmas dinner. We know what happened last year. We know what you did. She trusted you. They all trusted you. Do you remember what the police report said? Driver fled the scene. That's such a cold way to put it. 3 people died that night, Michael. A family going to Christmas Eve dinner. You changed your name, moved to a new city, started over, but we found you anyway. I packed a bag, hands trembling so bad I could barely zip it. Booked a hotel across town. The 5th letter was waiting on the hotel room bed. Running won't help. We're not following you, Michael. We're already here. We've always been here. Look in the mirror. I looked. My reflection stared back. Normal. But then it moved wrong. Smiled when I wasn't smiling. Raised a hand to wave. I ran. Checked into another hotel under a fake name. Cash only. The 6th letter was under my pillow. This is your last letter, Michael. We've said what needs to be said. Don't bother running anymore. We're waiting at home. It's time to face what you did. I sit in the hotel room now, watching snow fall outside. My phone shows 17 missed calls from Sarah. The police won't help. The cameras can't see them. My apartment key feels heavy in my pocket. Home is only 10 blocks away. When I left this morning, I saw footprints in the snow leading to my door. They appeared one by one, step by step, but no one was making them. They're waiting for me. I know that now. Tonight I'll go home. I'll unlock my door. I'll face what I did. They're right. Running won't help anymore. The snow is falling harder now. Through the window, I see footprints appearing in the fresh snow 7 stories below, leading from my apartment building to the hotel, getting closer with each silent step. They're almost here, and this time I won't run. I should have said no when Emma found the music box at the Christmas market. The temperature was below freezing, snow was starting to fall, and I just wanted to get home. But she stood there with those pleading eyes, holding the wooden box like it was made of gold. Please, Mom, it's so pretty. The vendor was an old woman bundled in layers of wool scarves. Her booth was tucked away in a corner of the market, filled with antiques that looked like they belonged in a museum. The music box sat on a faded red velvet cloth. It was beautiful, I'll give it that. Dark wood with intricate carvings of winter scenes, trees, snowflakes, what looked like children playing. The brass hardware was tarnished but intact. When Emma opened it, a tiny ballerina spun to a melody I didn't recognize. It's very old, the vendor said. Her accent was thick, Eastern European maybe. Made in Austria, 1920s, for a special child. I checked the price tag. Surprisingly cheap for an antique. Emma wound the key again, watching the ballerina spin. Okay, I said, but this is part of your Christmas present. The vendor's smile didn't reach her eyes as she wrapped the box in brown paper. Play it only when snow falls, she said. That's when the magic works best. I assumed she was trying to be whimsical for Emma's sake. I was wrong. The first incident happened 3 nights later. A blizzard had moved in, coating Chicago in 8 inches of snow with more falling. Emma had played with the music box all evening, winding it up over and over until I told her it was bedtime. At exactly midnight, the music started playing. I woke up instantly. The melody drifted down the hallway from Emma's room. I thought she had snuck out of bed to play with it again. But when I opened her door, she was sound asleep. The music box sat on her dresser, its key turning by itself. The ballerina spun, casting shadows on the wall from the nightlight. I reached for it. The wood was ice cold. Frost had formed around the edges. The melody changed. Not the tinkling lullaby from before. This was deeper, slower. Mixed with the music, I heard something else. Children laughing. I slammed the lid shut. The laughter stopped. Emma didn't stir. I took the box and locked it in my closet. The next morning it was back on her dresser. "I didn't take it out," Emma said when I asked her. "It was there when I woke up." That night, another snowstorm hit. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. At midnight, right on schedule, the music started. This time, I sat in Emma's room and watched. The key turned slowly, each rotation accompanied by a soft click. Frost spread across the wood like tiny ferns growing. The ballerina's painted smile seemed wider than before. The children's laughter came again, clearer now. Mixed with the voices, I heard the sound of footsteps in snow, running, playing. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Emma. She slept peacefully, undisturbed by the music. I grabbed the box and walked to the kitchen. The garbage disposal would take care of it. But when I reached for the switch, the laughter turned to screams, not playful anymore, terrified. The music became discordant, like a record playing too slow. The ballerina's head turned, actually turned, to look at me. Its painted eyes were real now and full of malice. I dropped the box. It hit the floor but didn't break. The music stopped. When I picked it up again, the ballerina was back in its original position, just a painted doll again. I drove to the Christmas market the next day, but the vendor's booth was gone. None of the other vendors remembered seeing it. That night, I put the box in my car and drove to the lake. The snow was falling harder now, reducing visibility to a few feet. I walked to the end of the pier, wind whipping at my coat. I threw the box as far as I could. It disappeared into the darkness with a distant splash. It was on Emma's windowsill when I got home. Water dripped from it, freezing instantly on the wood. A small puddle of lake water had formed on the sill, with tiny footprints in it, child-sized footprints leading to the box. The next night I tried burning it in the fireplace. The flames wouldn't touch it. The wood didn't even scorch. On the seventh night, with yet another snowstorm raging outside, I gave up trying to destroy it. At midnight, I sat in Emma's room and let it play. The music started soft, then grew louder. The laughter returned. In the shadows on the wall, I saw them, children playing in the snow, throwing snowballs, building snowmen. They wore clothes from another time, another place. One of them turned to look at me, a little girl in a red coat. She waved. The shadows moved across the wall, getting closer to where Emma slept. Their laughter echoed in the room now, not just in the music. "That's close enough," I said. They stopped. The little girl in red pointed at Emma, then at herself. "No," I said, "you can't have her." The music changed again, becoming that slow, discordant sound. The shadows twisted, the children's forms elongating, distorting. "She's special," they whispered in unison. "Like we were special." "What do you want?" "To play," they said. "Forever. In the snow. Like before." The ballerina turned its head again, eyes gleaming in the dark. "Before the fire," it said in a child's voice. "Before they locked us in." Ice spread from the music box across the dresser, across the floor. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath. "The lady at the market," I said. "She knew what this was, what you are." "She was one of us," they whispered. "She escaped the fire, but she couldn't let go, couldn't stop trying to find more special children." The shadows reached for Emma. Frost formed on her blanket. "Stop," I said. "Please. She's all I have." The music slowed. The children whispered among themselves in a language I didn't understand. The little girl in red stepped forward, her shadow distinct on the wall. "We'll stay in the box," she said. "We'll only play when it snows. We won't take her. But she has to listen to our songs." "Why?" "So we're not forgotten. So someone remembers how special we were." I looked at Emma, still sleeping peacefully. "Just the songs? You won't hurt her?" "Promise," they said in unison. "When snow falls, we'll dance and sing. That's all." The ice retreated. The shadows pulled back. The ballerina resumed its normal position. Now, every time it snows, the music box plays at midnight. Emma sleeps through it, but I stay awake and watch the shadows dance on her wall. I listen to their songs and their laughter. Sometimes, when the snow is particularly heavy, I see small footprints on the windowsill, frost patterns that look like children playing. The ballerina spins, and the little girl in red waves to me from the shadows. They keep their promise. They don't try to take Emma, but they watch her sleep, and they whisper among themselves about how special she is. And every time it snows, I sit in her room until dawn, making sure they stay in the shadows where they belong. The music box is playing now. Outside, the snow is falling thick and fast. On the wall, the children are dancing, and the ballerina is turning its head to smile at me with that painted, perfect face. The gas gauge hit empty somewhere between Miles City and Billings, Montana. The temperature outside was 15 below zero, and the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see past my headlights. My truck's heater was fighting a losing battle against the cold. I'd been driving for 14 hours straight, trying to make it to Seattle before Christmas. The GPS was useless out here, no signal, just endless white darkness and the rumble of my engine. The first sign I'd seen in an hour appeared through the snow. Joe's Cafe, 2 miles. Below it, a neon coffee cup flickered weakly. My truck coughed. The engine sputtered. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, praying it would make it 2 more miles. The cafe appeared like a mirage through the white haze, a small building with warm yellow light spilling from its windows. Christmas lights hung in random patterns across the front, casting multicolored reflections on the snow. An old-fashioned "open" sign buzzed in the window. I pulled into the empty parking lot just as my engine died. No other cars in sight, just endless white in every direction. A bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Warm air hit my face, smelling of coffee and pie. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s. Red vinyl booths, chrome-edged tables, a long counter with spinning stools. Behind the counter, a waitress in a pale blue uniform looked up from wiping down the coffee maker. Her name tag said, Betty. "Welcome to Joe's," she said. Her voice had a strange echo to it, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Nasty night to be driving." "Yeah," I said, stamping snow from my boots. "Lucky I found you. My truck just died." "Lucky indeed." She smiled. Her teeth were very white in the fluorescent light. 5 other customers sat scattered around the cafe. An old man in a booth by himself, reading a newspaper. A young couple sharing a piece of pie. 2 men in heavy coats at the counter. A woman in the corner booth, staring out the window. They all looked up when I came in. Their eyes reflected the fluorescent lights like cat's eyes. I sat at the counter. Betty poured coffee without asking. The liquid was black as tar and steaming hot. "Where you headed?" she asked. "Seattle, trying to make it for Christmas." "Long way to go in this weather." She gestured at the window. The snow was falling faster now, if that was possible. I took a sip of coffee. It had no taste, but the heat spread through my chest. "Phone working?" I asked. "Need to call AAA." "Lines are down." one of the men at the counter said. His voice had that same hollow echo. Storm took them out. I checked my cell phone. No signal. Betty set a menu in front of me. The prices were impossibly low. Burger and fries for 65 cents, coffee for a dime. Special tonight is the meatloaf, she said, Joe's famous recipe. Who's Joe? The old man with the newspaper looked up. His paper was dated December 24th, 1954. Joe's been gone a long time, Betty said, but his recipes live on. I ordered the meatloaf. It arrived on a blue willow pattern plate, steaming hot. The meat was gray and had a strange metallic smell. Eat up, Betty said. You'll need your strength. Storm's getting worse. The couple in the booth stood up. They wore heavy wool coats that looked like they came from another era. Snow fell from their shoulders, but it didn't melt. We should go, the man said. It's almost time. They walked to the door. No footprints followed them across the floor. The old man folded his newspaper and stood. The woman in the corner booth got up too. They all moved toward the door. Time for what? I asked. Betty smiled again. Her skin looked blue under the fluorescent lights. The storm, she said. It comes every night at midnight, takes us all away, but we always come back when the next traveler needs shelter. I looked at my watch. 11:55 p.m. The two men at the counter stood up. Their coats were covered in frost. You should come with us, one said. Better than freezing in your truck. My hands started shaking. I pushed away from the counter. I need to go. Check on my truck. Won't start, Betty said. Gas line's frozen. Besides, it's almost midnight. I ran to the door. It wouldn't open. Through the window, I saw my truck was completely buried in snow. The parking lot had disappeared, just endless white in every direction. 11:57 p.m. Don't fight it, the old man said. His newspaper had disintegrated into yellow confetti. We all tried at first, but the storm always wins. 11:58 p.m. The fluorescent lights flickered. Ice spread across the windows from the inside. How long? I asked. How long have you been here? Time moves different here, Betty said. Her uniform had frost on the edges now. Sometimes it feels like days, sometimes decades. 11:59 p.m. The others gathered by the door. Their edges were blurring, like old photographs fading. Last chance, Betty said. Come with us, or try to make it on your own, but no one ever makes it on their own. The lights went out. In the darkness their eyes glowed like ice. Midnight. The storm hit like a physical force. The windows exploded inward, sending shards of frozen glass flying. Snow filled the cafe, swirling around us in a white tornado. The others disappeared one by one into the storm. Their voices lingered, calling me to follow. I fought against the wind, trying to reach the door. The cold cut through my clothes like knives. Betty's voice came from the white void. See you tomorrow night, honey. We'll keep your coffee hot. The storm took me. I felt my feet leave the ground. The cold penetrated to my bones. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting at the counter. Warm light filled the cafe. Betty stood behind the counter, wiping down the coffee maker. The clock on the wall said 11:30 p.m. Through the window, I saw headlights approaching through the snow. A new traveler. Betty poured a fresh cup of coffee. Steam rose from it, carrying that empty smell. Welcome to the night shift, she said. Her smile was white as frost. Hope you like meatloaf. The bell above the door jingled. Snow swirled in as a man stamped his boots on the mat. Welcome to Joe's, we all said in unison, our voices echoing in the fluorescent light. Outside, the storm howled. At midnight it would come for us again, but we always come back. The cafe needs us. Travelers need us. The coffee is always hot, the meatloaf is always ready, and the storm is always waiting. Betty poured another cup of coffee. The new man sat down. Only 20 minutes until midnight. First bulb burned out on December 1st at exactly 11 p.m. I was sitting in bed reading when the bedroom light flickered 3 times and went dark. The temperature outside was -10 degrees, and 2 feet of snow had fallen since morning. I got up to change it. The new bulb lasted exactly 24 hours. At 11 p.m. the next night, it burned out too. My house sits alone at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by pine trees. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. In winter, the snow makes the road impassable most days. I'm used to being alone. The third night, I was ready. I sat in the wooden chair by my bed and watched the clock. At 10:59 p.m., the bulb started to flicker. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. My breath came out in white clouds. The digital thermometer on my nightstand showed the temperature falling, 68, 55, 42, 30. At exactly 11 p.m., the bulb exploded. Glass shattered across the hardwood floor. The room plunged into darkness, except for moonlight reflecting off the snow outside. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling. Black scorch marks surrounded the light fixture, spreading out like fingers reaching across the white paint. Something moved in the corner of my eye, a shadow passing across the moonlit window. When I turned, nothing was there, just endless white snow falling silently outside. The next day I called an electrician. He spent 2 hours checking the wiring. "Everything looks normal," he said. "No power surges, no loose connections. Sometimes old houses just have quirks." I bought industrial-strength bulbs rated for extreme temperatures. They lasted less than a day. That night, I set up my phone to record the ceiling. At 10:59 p.m., the temperature dropped again. Frost formed on the windows. The camera's display showed static, then went black. 11 p.m. The bulb shattered. In the moment before darkness fell, I saw something in the corner, a figure darker than the shadows around it. It moved when I wasn't looking directly at it. The video recording showed nothing but static. I installed security cameras in every room, motion sensors, temperature gauges. At 10:59 p.m., they all failed simultaneously. The shadow grew bolder. It stayed visible longer, moved more freely. Sometimes I caught glimpses of a face in the darkness, pale, with eyes like black ice. One night, I heard footsteps in the snow outside my window. They circled the house slowly, deliberately. When I looked out, I saw the tracks appearing in the fresh snow, one by one, no one making them. The tracks led to my bedroom window, then stopped. I started sleeping on the couch downstairs. The next morning, all my furniture was back in the bedroom. The coffee table had scratch marks across its surface, like something had dragged it up the stairs. The shadow followed me. Every night at 11 p.m., wherever I was in the house, the nearest light would shatter. The temperature would drop. The cameras would fail. I tried leaving, packed a bag, got in my car. The engine wouldn't start. Snow piled up around the tires, burying them in minutes. The shadow stood at my bedroom window, watching. I called the previous homeowner. Her voice shook when I mentioned the lights. "We didn't want to tell you," she said. "Didn't want to scare you away. But there was an accident, a long time ago. A girl got lost in a snowstorm. They found her frozen under the window. She was trying to get inside." I hung up. The temperature was dropping. 10:58 p.m. That night the shadow had a voice. It whispered from the corners of the room, words almost lost in the sound of wind. "Let me in." The glass in my bedroom window frosted over. A handprint appeared, pressed against the outside. Small, a child's hand. "I'm so cold." The next day, I removed every light bulb in the house, packed away the lamps, disconnected the ceiling fixtures. I would live in darkness if I had to. At 10:59 p.m., the house lit up like a beacon. Every socket, every fixture blazed with impossible brightness. The shadow stood in the center of my room, solid now. A girl in a torn winter coat, her skin blue-white with frost. "You can't keep me out," she said. "I'm already inside." The lights exploded all at once. Glass rained down. In the sudden darkness, I felt cold hands on my face. I ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, toward the front door. The handle was frozen solid. Ice spread across the walls, coating everything in crystalline patterns. Her footsteps followed me. Small bare feet, leaving patches of frost on the hardwood. "I just wanted to get warm," she whispered. "That's all I wanted." I turned. She stood at the bottom of the stairs. Ice crystals formed in the air around her, catching the moonlight like diamonds. "What do you want from me?" "Company." Her smile was full of frost. "It's lonely out there in the storm, but you know all about being lonely, don't you? All alone in this big house." She held out her hand. Ice spread from her fingers across the floor. "Stay with me. We can be lonely together." I backed away. My heel hit the wall. "Or you can try to run," she said, "like I did. See how far you get in the storm." Outside, the snow was falling harder. The wind howled through the trees. She took another step forward. The temperature dropped lower. My fingers were going numb. "Choose quickly," she said. "It's almost 11. I looked at the door, then back at her blue-white skin and black ice eyes, at her outstretched hand. The clock struck 11. Every night now, at exactly 11 p.m., the lights go out. The temperature drops. Frost spreads across the windows. She sits in the corner of my room, humming softly. Sometimes she tells me about the storm, about being lost in the endless white, about trying to find her way home. I don't try to leave anymore. The snow has buried the doors and windows. Ice coats everything inside. My breath comes out in white clouds. But I'm not alone, and neither is she. The lights don't work anymore. We don't need them. Her eyes glow bright enough in the darkness, and every night at 11 she holds out her frozen hand, and every night I take it. The 11:45 p.m. bus from downtown Chicago to Oak Park was running late. I stood at the stop on Western Avenue watching snow pile up on the empty benches. The temperature had dropped to -5 degrees. My phone showed 12:17 a.m. No cars had passed for 20 minutes. The storm was getting worse. The weather alert on my phone warned of whiteout conditions and advised against travel. But I had to get home. My apartment was too far to walk in this weather. The bus's headlights appeared through the falling snow like distant stars. It rolled to a stop in front of me, wipers pushing away the accumulating snow. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The driver looked at me through the rearview mirror as I boarded. His eyes were pale, almost colorless in the dim light. "Last bus of the night," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Better be sure this is where you want to go." I swiped my transit card and looked down the aisle. The bus was empty except for one passenger, a man sitting in the back row, face hidden in the shadow of a heavy winter coat. I took a seat halfway down the aisle. The door closed. The bus pulled away from the curb, tires crunching through fresh snow. The heater wasn't working. I could see my breath in front of me. Ice was forming on the inside of the windows, creeping patterns of frost that obscured the view outside. The man in the back didn't move. His presence felt wrong somehow, like a hole in the air. 5 minutes into the ride, we passed another bus stop. A woman was waiting there, bundled against the cold. Our driver didn't slow down. "Hey," I called out. "There's someone at that stop." The driver's eyes found mine in the mirror again. "No one's there." I turned to look back through the frosted window. The stop was empty. No footprints in the snow where the woman had been standing. The man in the back shifted slightly. His coat made no sound against the seat. 10 minutes later, we were in a part of the city I didn't recognize. The streets were too wide, the buildings too old. Snow swirled around the bus in unnatural patterns, like it was following us. "This isn't the regular route," I said. The driver didn't respond. His hands were bare despite the cold, skin pale as the snow outside. I checked my phone. No signal. The screen showed 12:17 a.m., the same time as when I'd boarded the bus. The man in the back raised his head slightly. Inside his hood, I caught a glimpse of skin the color of ice. My heart started pounding. I stood up, holding onto the seat in front of me. "I want to get off." The driver's eyes found mine again in the mirror. "Are you sure? Storm's getting worse." "Stop the bus." He nodded slowly. The bus pulled over to the curb. The door opened. "Last chance," the driver said. "Once you get off, we won't be coming back." I looked outside. The snow was falling impossibly fast now, the flakes too large, too angular, like shards of glass falling from the sky. The man in the back stood up. His movements were wrong, too fluid, like he was floating rather than walking. He started moving down the aisle toward me. I ran, down the steps, into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Behind me, I heard the bus door close. When I turned to look, the bus was already disappearing into the snow. Its tires left no tracks. The man in the back was pressed against the rear window, hood fallen back. His face was blue-white, eyes black as midnight. He smiled and raised one hand in farewell. The bus vanished completely. The sound of its engine cut off abruptly, leaving only the howl of the wind. I stood in the middle of an empty street I didn't recognize. Snow erased the world beyond a few feet in any direction. My phone still showed 12:17 a.m. A light appeared in the storm, another bus approaching. It stopped in front of me. The door opened. A different driver looked down at me, his skin the same pale color as the first, his eyes like holes in the snow. "Going my way?" he asked. In the back of the bus, a figure sat motionless in a heavy coat. I turned and ran. The storm tried to stop me, wind pushing against my body like hands made of ice. But I kept running. I don't know how long I ran, hours maybe. The streets all looked the same in the white darkness. Eventually, I recognized Western Avenue. My legs were numb, my lungs burning from the cold air. A bus stop appeared through the snow. The bench was empty, except for fresh snow. No footprints. I checked my phone. 12:17 a.m. In the distance, I saw headlights approaching. I started walking. My apartment was 5 miles away, but I'd rather walk than take another bus tonight. As I walked, I heard the bus stop behind me. The door opened with that hydraulic hiss. "Last bus of the night," a familiar voice called. "Better be sure this is where you want to go." I didn't look back, but I heard footsteps in the snow behind me. They didn't sound human. The bus pulled away, but the footsteps continued, getting closer, the sound of a heavy coat dragging through snow. I'm still walking. The snow is still falling. My phone still shows 12:17 a.m., and behind me, those footsteps keep coming. Patient, unhurried. They know I'll get tired eventually. Know I'll want to get out of the cold. Another bus just passed. The driver waved at me. His hand left a trail of frost in the air. The man in the back seat turned to watch me through the window. His smile was white as the storm. Sometimes I see other people waiting at bus stops. They look cold, tired, desperate to get home. I want to warn them. Tell them to walk instead. But by the time I reach the stops, they're always empty. Just fresh snow on the benches, no footprints. And behind me, those footsteps keep getting closer. I found the mirror while walking through Lincoln Park on December 15th. The temperature was 5 degrees below zero, and fresh snow covered everything. My boots crunched through 3 inches of powder as I took my usual shortcut across the frozen grounds. Something glinted in the snow near a bench. At first I thought it was a phone. People were always dropping things in the park. I brushed away the snow with my gloved hand. It was a small mirror, about the size of my palm. An antique-looking thing with a silver frame decorated with tiny, etched snowflakes. The glass was perfectly clear despite being half buried in ice. I picked it up. The metal was so cold it burned through my glove. I almost dropped it, but something made me hold on. The reflection showed my face, red from the cold. But something was wrong. The reflection's eyes were different, bloodshot, with dark circles underneath. The skin was too pale, almost blue around the lips. I blinked. The reflection blinked a half-second too late. It smiled. I wasn't smiling. I dropped the mirror back in the snow. My hand was shaking. The spot where the metal had touched my glove was covered in frost. I walked away quickly, not looking back. Got about 50 feet before I had to check. The mirror was gone. Just smooth, unbroken snow where it had been. When I got home, it was sitting on my coffee table. The frame was still covered in frost, making tiny puddles on the wood surface. I hadn't brought it home. I hadn't touched it again after dropping it. I picked up my phone to call the police, then stopped. What would I tell them? That a haunted mirror had followed me home? The reflection in the mirror moved, just slightly, a tilt of the head, a widening of the smile. The eyes were completely bloodshot now, the skin taking on the waxy look of frostbite. I grabbed the mirror and shoved it in a drawer in my kitchen, locked the drawer, spent the rest of the evening watching TV with all the lights on, trying to forget about it. At midnight, I went to brush my teeth. The mirror was sitting on my bathroom counter. The reflection wasn't me anymore. I mean, it was my face, but wrong. The skin was blue-white, cracked with frost. The eyes were solid black, like frozen ink. It raised its hand and pressed it against the glass from the inside. I ran out of the bathroom and slammed the door. Stood there breathing hard, heart pounding against my ribs. A soft tapping came from inside the bathroom, like fingernails on glass. I slept on the couch with all the lights on. In the morning, the mirror was on the coffee table again, reflecting the ceiling. I drove to the park and buried it in a snowbank. Drove home. It was waiting on my kitchen counter. I threw it in a dumpster behind my building. It appeared on my nightstand. I took it to a pawn shop. The owner offered me $50, said it looked like an antique. I took the money. When I got home, the mirror was in my bed. The reflection showed me sleeping, frost covering my face and pillow. I drove to the lake and threw it in, watched it sink into the black water. That night, my bathroom mirror showed the wrong reflection. My bedroom mirror, too. Every reflective surface in my apartment showed that frozen version of my face, smiling with blue-white lips. The next morning, the small mirror was back on my coffee table. The frame had barnacles on it, dripping lake water that froze instantly. I tried breaking it, hit it with a hammer. The glass didn't crack. Tried burning it. The flames wouldn't touch it. The reflection got worse each day. The skin cracked and peeled from frost damage. The black eyes sank deeper into the face. The smile grew wider, showing teeth sharp as icicles. It started showing me things in the background, frozen landscapes, endless fields of snow, dark shapes moving through blizzards. Other faces pressed against the glass, their features twisted by cold and fear. I stopped looking in any mirrors, covered all the reflective surfaces in my apartment with sheets, but I could still feel it watching me. Last night, I woke up at midnight to the sound of cracking ice. The mirror was on my chest, the frame so cold it burned through my shirt. The reflection reached up and pressed both hands against the glass. Frost spread out from its fingers across the mirror's surface. The glass started to ripple like water. A hand emerged, blue-white and covered in frost, reached for my face. I knocked the mirror to the floor and ran. Now I'm in a hotel room, writing this. The mirror is sitting on the desk in front of me. I've tried running, tried destroying it, tried giving it away. It always comes back. The reflection doesn't look like me at all now. The thing in the mirror is a creature of frost and darkness, with skin like cracked ice and eyes like frozen stars. But it's still smiling. The glass is rippling again. Frost is spreading across the desk, across the walls. The temperature in the room is dropping rapidly. The reflection is pressing against the glass with its whole body now. The surface bulges outward like a membrane. I can hear ice cracking. My fingers are getting numb as I type this. My breath comes out in white clouds. The glass is starting to split. Something is coming through. I should run. But where can I go? It always finds me. The mirror will be waiting, no matter where I hide. The reflection is reaching for me again. Its hands are breaking through the glass. The cold burns. I can't feel my fingers anymore. The mirror is... Text ends. The following was found written in frost on the hotel room window. Come find me. I'm in the park where it all began. Just look in any mirror, you'll see me waiting. I'm not alone anymore. And soon you won't be either. Just look in the mirror, smile, and let the cold in. We got lost somewhere between Chicago and Detroit. The GPS stopped working 2 hours ago, and the blizzard had reduced visibility to about 10 feet. My wife Sarah kept checking her phone, but there was no signal out here in the middle of nowhere. We should have stayed in Chicago, she said. My parents would have understood. The gas gauge dropped below a quarter tank. The temperature outside was minus 20 degrees. The heater was barely keeping up. A light appeared through the snow, a single fluorescent sign glowing in the darkness. Quick Mart, 24/7, always open. Thank God, I said, turning onto what I hoped was the entrance. Our car slid slightly on the ice before the tires caught. The store sat alone on what might have been a highway. No other buildings were visible through the snow. The parking lot was empty except for a single pickup truck covered in several inches of fresh powder. The windows glowed with a warm yellow light. Christmas decorations covered the glass, old-fashioned paper cutouts of Santa Claus and reindeer, the kind I remembered from my childhood in the 1980s. Looks like something from a time capsule, Sarah said. We parked near the entrance. The wind hit us as soon as we got out, cutting through our coats like razor blades. A bell jingled as we entered. The warmth inside was immediate and welcome. The store smelled like cinnamon and pine. An old man stood behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up and smiled. His name tag said, Earl. Welcome, folks. Nasty night to be traveling. Yeah, I said. We got lost. GPS is down. Technology, he said, shaking his head. Can't trust it out here, but you found us just in time. The store was bigger inside than it had looked from outside. Aisles stretched back farther than seemed possible, stocked with products I hadn't seen in years. Glass bottles of soda instead of plastic, candy bars in old packaging, magazines with dates from the 1970s, Sarah picked up a newspaper from a rack. "Han, look at this." The date read December 24th, 1975. "We keep the old papers for nostalgia," Earl said quickly. "Folks like remembering how things were." The fluorescent lights flickered. Outside, the snow fell harder. We grabbed some snacks and drinks. Everything was strangely cheap. 35 cents for a candy bar, 50 cents for a soda. "That'll be $2 even," Earl said when we brought our items to the counter. I handed him a 5. He opened an ancient cash register with a loud ding. The lights flickered again. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "You folks better hurry," Earl said, glancing at his watch. "It's almost time." "Time for what?" "Closing time." "But your sign says always open." He smiled. His teeth looked sharp in the fluorescent light. "Always open doesn't mean what you think it means." The wind outside grew louder. Snow pressed against the windows, obscuring the view completely. We headed for the door. It wouldn't open. "Storm's too strong now," Earl said. "You'll have to wait it out." Sarah tried her phone again. Still no signal. "Phones don't work here," Earl said. "Nothing works here except what we want to work." The lights flickered one more time, then went out completely. Emergency lights came on, casting everything in a red glow. The aisles seemed to stretch back even further now, disappearing into darkness. Products on the shelves changed as we watched. Labels fading, packaging decomposing, food rotting and regenerating in seconds. Earl's smile widened. His skin looked different in the red light, pale, almost translucent. "Welcome to the night shift." The temperature plummeted. Our breath came out in white clouds. Other customers appeared in the aisles. An old woman in a dress from the 1950s. A man in a leather jacket from the 1980s. A family in clothes from the 1990s. All pale, all smiling with two sharp teeth. They moved wrong, like watching a film played slightly too slow. "What is this place?" Sarah's voice shook. "Just a store," Earl said. "Been here longer than the road, longer than the town that used to be here. We open when people need us, when they get lost in the storm." The other customers moved closer. Their footsteps made no sound on the linoleum floor. "The storm never ends," the woman in the 1950s dress said. "But you get used to it." "We all got lost once," the man in the leather jacket added. "All found our way here." I grabbed Sarah's hand and ran for the back of the store. There had to be another exit. The aisles went on forever. The products got older the further we went. Items from the 1960s, the 1950s, the 1940s. Decades of lost things, forgotten things. Behind us, footsteps. The other customers following slowly, patiently. We found an emergency exit and pushed through it. We were back at the front of the store. Earl stood at the counter, still smiling. "Told you," he said. "Always open doesn't mean what you think it means." The windows were completely covered in snow now. The door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. The other customers surrounded us, their smiles identical to Earl's. "Don't worry," the woman in the 1950s dress said. "The first few decades are the hardest. But we have everything you need," the man in the leather jacket added. "Everything you remember, everything you miss." "And we're always open," Earl said. "Always here, always waiting for more lost souls to find us in the storm." The emergency lights turned blue, then green, then colors that don't have names. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Wake up," she whispered. "Please wake up." I opened my eyes. We were in our car, buried in snow. The engine was dead. The windows were frozen over. Through the ice I saw a light, the Quick Mart sign, glowing in the darkness. The store's windows were dark except for one small light, a candle burning on the counter. Earl stood behind it, waving us in. Other figures moved in the darkness behind him, all waving, all smiling. Sarah stirred beside me. Where are we? I looked at the dashboard clock. December 24th, 1975, 11:59 p.m. We're home, I said. We're finally home. The snow cleared just enough to see the sign properly. Quick Mart, 24/7, always open for those who need us, for those who are lost, for those who can never leave. Earl opened the door and stepped out into the storm. The others followed him. They're coming to help us out of the car. Their footprints in the snow disappear as soon as they make them. But that's okay. We're all lost here, and the store is always open. The alarm went off at exactly midnight on December 21st. I was alone in the office, working late to finish year-end reports. The temperature outside was -15 degrees, and snow had been falling steadily for 6 hours. The sound pierced the silence, not the usual fire alarm screech, but a deep, resonant tone that made my teeth vibrate. Red emergency lights cast rotating shadows across my cubicle walls. I grabbed my coat and phone. Standard procedure was to exit down the emergency stairs. Our office was on the 12th floor of an old downtown Chicago building. Most people had left hours ago, trying to beat the storm. The stairwell door was ice cold to the touch. When I opened it, a blast of freezing air hit my face. The temperature in the stairwell was well below freezing. Frost covered the metal handrails. My breath came out in thick white clouds under the emergency lights. Something was wrong. The building's heating system shouldn't have failed this completely, this quickly. I heard footsteps above me, heavy boots on metal stairs, coming down from the floor above. But the 14th floor was empty, under renovation, sealed off for months. The footsteps got closer, slow, deliberate steps. A dark liquid dripped down the stairs, freezing instantly on the metal. I started down, moving as quietly as possible. The emergency lights flickered with each footstep from above. The door to the 11th floor was frozen shut. Ice had formed around the frame, sealing it closed. The footsteps reached my floor. I looked up. Nothing. Just empty stairs disappearing into darkness. The footsteps had stopped, but the dripping continued. Dark drops fell past me, freezing into black ice on the steps, a cold breath on the back of my neck. "You shouldn't be here," a voice whispered. It sounded like ice cracking. "The building is closed," another voice said from the direction of my desk. This one sounded like wind through empty halls. "No one should be here," a third voice added from behind a cubicle wall, like water running under frozen rivers. They stepped into view, 3 figures made of winter itself. The first dripped water that froze in mid-air, its business suit crystallized with ice. Its face was bloated, water leaking from its mouth. The second wore old firefighter gear, charred and frozen. Smoke rose from its body, freezing into black snow. The third wore a security uniform from another era, its skin gray with frostbite, icicles hanging from its fingers. "Who are you?" My voice shook from the cold. "We worked here," the waterlogged one said. "We died here," the burned one added. "We guard here," the frozen one finished. "When?" 1967, the waterlogged one said. "Flood in the basement. Drowned checking the electrical room." 1982, the burned one said. "Fire on 14. Got trapped when the floor collapsed." 1995, the frozen one said. "Blizzard. Building lost power. Froze at my desk." They moved closer. The temperature dropped further. Ice formed on my skin. "The building remembers," they said in unison. "The building keeps us." "Why are you here?" I asked. "To warn you," the waterlogged one said. "To save you," the burned one added. "To make you leave," the frozen one finished. The alarm tone changed pitch, lower, deeper, making the windows vibrate. "It's starting again," they said together. The windows all slammed shut at once. Ice sealed them instantly. "What's starting?" "What always starts," the waterlogged one said. "At midnight." "In winter," the burned one added. "In storms," the frozen one finished. Snow started falling inside the office, the kind of snow that shouldn't be possible indoors. I kept moving down. 9 floors to go. The temperature dropped with each floor. Ice spread across the walls in crystalline patterns. The emergency lights dimmed, their red glow barely penetrating the frost that covered them. Floor 10. More footsteps, this time below me. Coming up. I stopped, trapped between whatever was above and whatever was coming up. The lower footsteps got closer. They didn't sound right, too fluid, like someone walking through water. A shadow appeared on the wall below, cast by the emergency lights. Too tall, too thin to be human. It stretched up the walls as the footsteps got closer. I tried the 10th floor door, also frozen shut. The shadow reached my level. The footsteps stopped. I forced myself to look down. Water pooled on the landing below, instantly freezing into black ice. In it, I saw a reflection, a figure standing behind me, its skin blue-white, its clothes dripping water that froze in midair. I ran up, back toward the first set of footsteps. Better to face what I knew was there than what I'd just seen. The thing below started climbing again. Its movements made wet, sucking sounds, like pulling feet out of mud. Floor 11, floor 12, my office floor. I tried the door. Ice cracked as it opened. The office was dark except for the red emergency lights. Snow blew through the windows, all of them somehow open, though I knew I'd closed them before leaving my desk. The cubicle walls were covered in frost. My computer screen showed the time, 12:17 a.m. It hadn't changed since the alarm went off. Footsteps in the snow that covered the carpet. Leading to my desk, I heard the stairwell door open behind me. Wet footsteps, the sound of dripping water. Another set of footsteps came from the direction of the elevator lobby, heavy boots crunching in snow. They had me surrounded. My phone showed no signal. The screen was covered in frost patterns that formed as I watched. The wet footsteps got closer. It fell upward, defying gravity. The 3 figures began to fade. "Run," they said, "before the building remembers you too." They disappeared, but their voices lingered. 14th floor is waiting. Water's rising in the basement. Cold's coming through the walls. I ran for the emergency stairs. The door was gone, replaced by solid wall covered in ice. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Inside, 3 empty spaces in the shape of men. Water on the floor, burn marks on the walls, frost patterns in the air. The building groaned. Ice cracked. Water dripped. Fire alarms sang their deep, resonant tone. I work somewhere else now, somewhere new, with modern heating and updated safety systems. But sometimes, during winter storms, I hear that alarm, feel that cold, and in every reflective surface, windows, computer screens, polished desktops, I see them watching, waiting, warning the next person who stays too late, before the building remembers them too. The December wind cut through my coat as I hurried toward the station. It was 11:47 p.m. The last train would leave in 8 minutes. My shoes crunched against the fresh snow covering the platform. The station was empty except for a sleepy attendant in his booth. I could still taste the champagne from the office party on my tongue. My head buzzed slightly from the drinks, but I was clear-headed enough to know I needed to get home. Sarah would be waiting up, probably worried. I hadn't meant to stay so late. The train rolled in right on schedule, its brakes squealing against the frozen tracks. The doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. Warm air rushed out. I stepped inside the last car, stamping my feet to shake off the snow. The fluorescent lights flickered, making the empty seats cast long shadows. Almost empty seats. There was one other passenger, sitting in the back corner. They wore a dark, worn coat with the hood pulled up, hiding their face. Something about the way they sat, completely still like a statue, made my skin prickle. I chose a seat halfway down the car, keeping some distance between us. The doors closed. The train lurched forward, beginning its journey through the snow-covered city. The windows showed only darkness and occasional blurs of streetlights through the falling snow. The hooded figure didn't move, not once, but I could feel them watching me. Every few minutes I'd glance back, trying to be subtle about it. The hood was always oriented in my direction, like a camera fixed on its target. I pulled out my phone, trying to distract myself. No signal. The screen showed 11:58 p.m. The journey home usually took 30 minutes. The train rocked and swayed. The fluorescent lights continued their arrhythmic dance, sometimes dimming for several seconds before brightening again. The heating system hummed. No other sounds, just the clatter of wheels on tracks and that persistent silence from the back of the car. 12:07 a.m. I switched seats, moving closer to the front of the car. My palms were sweaty despite the cold that seemed to be seeping in through the windows. The figure remained motionless, but I swear the hood turned slightly, tracking my movement. 12:13 a.m. The snow was falling harder now. The windows had frosted over, leaving only vague shapes visible outside. The train seemed to be moving slower than usual. Each station we passed was deserted, platforms covered in untouched snow. My stop was next. I stood up, grabbing the overhead rail. My legs felt shaky. The figure still hadn't moved. Not a single shift in position. Not a cough, not a rustle of fabric. Just that steady, hidden stare. The train began to slow. Through the frosted windows, I could make out the familiar shape of my station. The brakes squealed. The doors opened. I hurried out, not looking back. The platform was covered in fresh snow, smooth and untouched. The storm had intensified. Large flakes swirled in the yellow light of the platform lamps. My footprints were sharp and clear in the powder as I walked toward the station exit. Something made me turn around. The hooded figure was still visible through the train window, sitting in exactly the same position. As I watched, the train pulled away, disappearing into the swirling snow. That's when I noticed. My footprints were the only ones in the snow. The entire platform was pristine, except for my trail from the train door to where I stood. I looked down at my tracks, then back at the vanishing train. The snow around the door where I'd exited should have shown other prints. The hooded figure had been real. I'd seen them. But there were no other marks in the snow, not a single indication that anyone else had gotten on or off that train. My phone buzzed, suddenly finding signal. 12:32 a.m. 3 missed calls from Sarah. I started walking home quickly, trying to focus on the sound of snow crunching under my feet. But I couldn't shake the image of that motionless figure, or the impossible smoothness of the snow where their footprints should have been. The next morning I called the transit authority, asked about the last train, trying to sound casual. The clerk checked the schedule, then double-checked it. "That's strange," she said. "The system shows the last train was canceled last night due to the storm. No trains ran on that line after 11 p.m. I hung up, walked to my window. Outside, my footprints from the night before were still visible in the snow, leading from the station. A single trail of steps in an ocean of white. Sometimes now, when I can't sleep, I find myself thinking about that night. About the hooded figure who never moved. about the impossibly empty platform, about the train that supposedly never ran. I don't take the last train anymore. I'd rather pay for a cab, or walk, or stay at a hotel. Anything to avoid being in those flickering fluorescent lights, watching my breath fog in the cold air, wondering what might be sitting in the back of the car, hidden beneath a dark hood, waiting. The clerk must have been wrong about the schedule. The train had to have been real. I'd felt the metal rail under my hand, heard the screech of the brakes, seen my reflection in the windows. But late at night, when the wind howls outside my bedroom window, I remember those missing footprints in the virgin snow. And I wonder what exactly was watching me that night, and whether it's still riding that last train, waiting for another passenger to board. I've asked other commuters if they've seen anything strange on the late trains. Most shake their heads, hurry away. But occasionally, someone's eyes will widen slightly. They'll glance around, then lean in close, and they'll tell me about a night when they took the last train home, about a hooded figure that never moved, about empty platforms and missing footprints. We never say much after sharing these stories. What is there to say? We just nod, understanding passing between us. Then we go our separate ways, carefully checking train schedules, making sure we're home before the last train of the night begins its route. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, the drinks from the party playing tricks on my mind. But last week, I was working late again, lost track of time. When I finally packed up my laptop, it was 11:43 p.m. I stood outside the station for a long time, watching the snow fall. The platform was empty, pristine white. At 11:55 p.m., I heard the familiar screech of brakes, saw the train's headlight cutting through the storm. The doors opened with that same hydraulic hiss. Warm air spilled out onto the platform. And there, in the back corner of the last car, sat a motionless figure in a dark, worn coat, hood pulled up to hide their face. I took a cab home. This morning I requested a transfer to our company's downtown office. It's closer to home, no train required. Sarah thinks I'm crazy, giving up the better commute. But she wasn't there that night. She didn't see the figure that never moved. She didn't walk across that impossibly empty platform, leaving the only footprints in the snow. Sometimes I dream about that train. In my dreams, I'm always sitting in that last car, under those flickering lights. The hooded figure is there, watching. But in the dreams, I stand up, walk to the back of the car, reach out to pull back that hood. I always wake up before I see what's underneath. Maybe that's for the best. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some trains are better left untaken. But I can't help wondering about that figure, still riding through the snow-covered city night after night, still watching, still waiting, never moving, never leaving footprints. And I wonder how many others have seen it. How many have stepped onto that last train, not knowing what awaits them in the back corner? How many have hurried off at their stops, leaving single trails of footprints in virgin snow? The last train still runs every night. I see it sometimes from my apartment window, a blur of light through the falling snow. And sometimes, if I look carefully at the last car, I catch a glimpse of something dark sitting in the back corner, hood raised, perfectly still. I keep telling myself to forget about it, to focus on my new job, my shorter commute, my normal life. But late at night, when the wind rattles my windows and the snow falls thick and heavy, I find myself thinking about that train, about that figure, about those missing footprints. And I wonder if somewhere out there, right now, someone is boarding the last train home. Someone is walking down that aisle under those flickering lights. Someone is noticing the hooded figure in the back corner. Someone is feeling that steady, hidden gaze. I want to warn them. Tell them to take a cab, wait until morning, walk home through the storm, anything but stay on that train. But I can't. All I can do is hope they get off at their stop. Hope they notice the pristine snow around their footprints. Hope they understand what it means before it's too late. Because the last train is still running, and its passenger is still waiting, watching, never moving, never leaving tracks in the snow, just sitting there in the back corner, hood raised, as the train rolls through the endless night. I didn't notice it at first. When you move to a new place in winter, snow seems normal, expected. But after 3 weeks in my remote cabin, I started to see things that didn't add up. The thermostat read 45 degrees that first afternoon. The sun was bright. Every patch of snow in the surrounding area had turned to slush, except for the snow around my cabin. It stayed pristine, powder white, frozen solid. I walked the property line that day, boots crunching through 8 inches of snow that should have melted days ago. The strange part wasn't just that it remained frozen. It was the perfect smoothness of it. No animal tracks, no broken surface where sun had started to melt it. Just an unbroken white blanket surrounding my new home. That night, I heard it first. A soft scraping sound outside my bedroom window, like someone dragging their feet through snow, back and forth, back and forth. When I looked out, the moonlight showed fresh tracks in the snow, perfect circles, starting and ending at my window. I told myself it was probably deer, or maybe wolves. Animals did strange things sometimes, right? But in the morning, I stood at my window staring at those tracks. They weren't animal prints. They were footsteps, human footsteps, walking in a perfect circle around my cabin, always ending at my bedroom window. I tried to clear the snow that day, spent hours shoveling, making neat piles along the driveway. By evening, my back ached and my hands were raw inside my gloves. I'd cleared a good 20 feet around the cabin, felt better, more in control. The next morning, the snow was back. Not fresh snow. There hadn't been any weather overnight. It was the same snow, somehow returned to exactly where it had been. My neat piles were gone. The smooth white blanket was back, unbroken, except for those circular footprints. That's when I started digging. Not just shoveling the surface, but really digging down. The snow was packed hard, like it had been compressed by years of pressure. Each shovelful revealed layers, like rings in a tree trunk, but made of ice. In the third layer down, I found the first coin, an old penny, dated 1922, perfectly preserved in the ice. By sunset, I'd found more. Marbles, a child's spinning top, a silver locket with a photograph so faded I couldn't make out the face. All frozen in layers of snow that never melted. The footprints appeared again that night. This time, they started at the spot where I'd been digging, circled 3 times, then ended at my window. I watched from behind my curtains as they formed, one after another, pressing into the snow. No feet visible, just the impressions appearing, step by step, in the moonlight. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in my kitchen with all the lights on, drinking coffee that didn't help with the cold feeling in my stomach. Around 3 a.m., I heard the first thump under my bedroom floor. It sounded like something solid hitting packed snow. Then another thump, and another. Moving slowly, deliberately, in a line from the outer wall toward the center of the room, toward where my bed would be if I'd been sleeping. I pressed my ear to the floor. The thumping stopped. In the silence I heard something else, a soft scraping, like fingernails against ice. It was coming from directly beneath the floorboards. When the sun rose, I put on my warmest clothes and started digging again. Not at the surface this time. I went to the basement. The dirt floor was frozen solid. I used a pickaxe, chipping away at the ice-hard earth. 3 feet down, I hit snow. Not dirt, not rock, snow. Pure white, packed as hard as concrete. I kept digging. More layers, more preserved objects. A rusted key, a child's shoe, a pocket watch, its hands frozen at 3:17. The temperature that day hit 50 degrees. The snow around my property line remained frozen. The circular footprints reappeared every night, always ending at my window, always accompanied by that scraping sound. I started researching the property's history. The county records showed a gap. From 1923 to 1924, the land had no listed owner, just a blank space in the records. When I asked the clerk about it, she shrugged, said records from that time were often incomplete. But she did tell me something else. The winter of 1923 was the coldest on record. 3 children went missing that January. They were last seen playing in the snow near where my cabin now stands. That night, the thumping under my floor started again. This time, I heard something new, a sound like ice cracking, like something breaking free after being frozen for a very long time. I ran outside in my pajamas, started digging frantically at the spot where I'd found the penny. The snow was softer now, loose, like it was finally starting to melt. 6 feet down, my shovel hit something solid, a small shoe, identical to the one I'd found in the basement, and next to it, preserved in the snow, 3 sets of footprints, small footprints, child-sized, leading in a circle, ending at what would become my bedroom window. I packed my car that night, drove to the nearest hotel, called a real estate agent in the morning, listed the cabin for sale. But I keep checking the weather reports for that area. The temperature has hit 60 degrees. All the snow in the region has melted, except for that perfect white blanket around my cabin. It's still there, still frozen, still hiding its layers of preserved time, still collecting footprints in perfect circles every night. Last week, someone sent me a newspaper clipping. It was from 1924, a small article about 3 missing children. They found their belongings scattered in the snow. A penny, a spinning top, a silver locket. But they never found the children. The article mentioned one other detail. The night the children disappeared, the temperature was 50 degrees. But the search party reported something strange. The snow around the search area wouldn't melt. It stayed frozen solid, pure white, unmarked except for circular footprints that led nowhere. I sold the cabin yesterday, signed the papers without even looking at the final price. Just wanted to be done with it. But this morning, I woke up to find something on my hotel room window, a perfect handprint made of frost, and behind it, in the distance, I swear I could hear that familiar sound, like fingernails scratching against ice, like something trying to break free from layers of snow that never melt. The new owners move in next week. I should warn them, tell them about the footprints, the preserved objects, the sounds beneath the floor. But who would believe me? Who would believe in snow that never melts, in footprints that appear by themselves, in layers of ice that hold more than just frozen water? So I'll keep my silence. Try to forget about what lies beneath that perfect white blanket. Try not to think about those 3 children playing in the snow on a winter day in 1923, making circles around a place where my bedroom window would one day be. But sometimes, on cold nights, I dream about that basement, about the layers of snow going down and down, about the sounds of scratching beneath the floor. And I wonder if the snow hasn't been preserving the past, but protecting us from it. If those layers of ice aren't a record of what happened, but a barrier keeping something contained. And I wonder if it's finally starting to melt. The weather report this morning showed the temperature at my old cabin has reached 65 degrees. The snow is still there, still frozen, still perfect. But in the satellite image, I can see something new. The circles of footprints are getting wider, moving outward, breaking free from their perfect pattern. And in the center of each circle, the snow looks different, darker, like something beneath it is finally reaching the surface. I should call someone, the police, the historical society, someone who might make sense of preserved pennies and frozen footprints and sounds beneath the floor. But instead, I'm sitting in my hotel room, watching the temperature rise on my weather app, wondering what happens when snow that has held its secrets for 100 years finally starts to melt. The new owners will find out soon enough. They'll see the footprints, hear the sounds. Maybe they'll dig down through those layers of time, find their own preserved treasures, draw their own conclusions about what happened that winter in 1923. Or maybe they'll do what I did. Run, try to forget, leave the snow to keep its secrets for another 100 years. But I know better now. Nothing stays frozen forever. Not snow, not time, not the truth about 3 children who went missing on a warm winter day, leaving nothing but footprints in circles and toys preserved in layers of ice that never melted. Until now. The snowstorm hit without warning. 1 minute Mark and I were driving down the empty mountain road, talking about the conference we'd just left. The next, we could barely see 10 feet in front of the car. "How much farther to the hotel?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle against the snow. Mark checked his phone. "No signal, but I think it's about 30 miles. A gust of wind rocked the car. The headlights caught swirling walls of white. The temperature gauge on the dashboard showed 12 degrees and dropping. That's when the engine started making the noise. A high-pitched whine followed by a series of clicks. The check engine light blinked on. Then all the dashboard lights went dark. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. I turned the key. Nothing, not even a click, just silence and the sound of wind howling around us. "Try it again," Mark said. His breath was visible in the rapidly cooling car. I did. Nothing. We sat there for a moment, watching snow pile up on the hood. "We can't stay here," I said. "We'll freeze if we wait for someone to find us." Mark nodded toward something in the darkness ahead. "There's a light through the trees." I squinted through the windshield. A faint yellow glow flickered between the snow-laden branches, maybe a quarter-mile ahead. We grabbed our coats from the back seat. I took the flashlight from the glove compartment. The wind hit us like a physical force when we stepped out. The snow was already past our ankles. We followed the road toward the light. The wind drove snow into our faces. My hands went numb inside my gloves. Mark's teeth were chattering. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, we saw it. A small cabin set back from the road. Smoke rose from the chimney. A single window glowed with warm light. "Hello?" I called out, knocking on the door. No answer. I tried the handle. It turned. The door opened into a single room. A fire burned in a stone fireplace. 2 chairs sat nearby. A small kitchen area occupied one corner. A narrow bed stood against the far wall. "Anyone here?" Mark called out. Our voices echoed slightly in the empty cabin. The fire was burning strong. A half-full coffee mug sat on a small table between the chairs. Steam still rose from it. "Someone must have just been here," I said. My stomach tightened. Maybe they went out for firewood. We closed the door against the storm. The warmth from the fire reached us slowly. I walked to the kitchen area. The coffee in the pot was still hot. "We should leave a note," Mark said. "Explain why we're here." I found paper and a pen in a drawer, wrote a quick explanation about our car breaking down, added my phone number. The wind rattled the windows. Snow pressed against the glass. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across the walls. That's when we heard the first footsteps outside. Slow, crunching steps in the snow. They circled the cabin once, stopped at the door. We stared at the handle. It didn't move. The steps started again, another complete circle. This time, they paused at each window, like someone looking in. "Hello?" Mark called out. "We're sorry to intrude. Our car broke down." No response, just more footsteps, another circle, and another. Then we heard the whispers, soft at first, barely audible over the wind. They seemed to come from all around the cabin. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "It sounded like someone saying our names," Mark finished. The whispers grew louder, clear enough now to make out words. They were saying our names, over and over. Mark, David, Mark, David. But it wasn't one voice. It was many voices, slightly out of sync, creating an echo effect that made my skin crawl. The footsteps continued, circle after circle. The whispers grew louder with each pass. "Look," Mark pointed at the coffee mug. The liquid inside had frozen solid. The fire still burned, but the room was getting colder. Our breath came out in white clouds. Frost began forming on the inside of the windows. The whispers pressed against the glass like physical things. The footsteps grew faster. The voices saying our names became urgent, insistent. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." Mark nodded. We grabbed our coats. I reached for the door handle. The whispers stopped. The footsteps stopped. Complete silence fell, broken only by the crack and pop of the fire. I pulled the door open. The storm had died down. The snow around the cabin was smooth, unmarked. No footprints, not a single track in any direction. But there were paths in the snow, perfect circles around the cabin. The snow was pressed down in continuous lines, like something had been dragged around and around the building. The circles started at the door and worked their way outward. The outermost circle disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of light from the windows. We ran, back toward the road, back toward our car. The wind stayed quiet. The snow had stopped falling. Our footprints were the only marks in the fresh powder. The car started on the first try. We drove straight through to the hotel, didn't stop once, didn't look back, didn't talk about what had happened. The next morning I called the local sheriff's office, asked about cabins in that area. The deputy sounded confused. "There aren't any cabins on that stretch of road," he said. "Nothing for 20 miles in either direction," I insisted. Described the cabin, the fireplace, the coffee pot. "Sir," he said slowly, "that road was built 3 years ago. Before that, it was all forest. No one's ever built anything there." I hung up, looked at the note I'd written, still folded in my pocket. The paper had grown brittle, like it was very old. The ink had faded to brown. That afternoon, Mark and I drove back. The snow had melted in the morning sun. We found the spot where we'd left our car, followed our tracks from the previous night. The footprints led into untouched forest. No cabin, no clearing, no sign that anything had ever been built there. But we did find something. In the melting snow, right where the cabin should have been, we found circles, perfect circles of dead grass, each one larger than the last, spreading outward from a central point, like something had been walking in circles for a very long time, killing everything in its path. We never talked about that night again. But sometimes, when the snow falls heavy and the wind blows cold, I think about that cabin, about the coffee still steaming in the cup, about the voices that knew our names, and I wonder about those circles in the snow. Wonder if they're still there, under the new grass that's grown. Wonder if something is still walking those paths, whispering names in the dark. Last week I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellow with age. My handwriting, faded but readable. The note I'd left in the cabin. Under my message, in fresh ink, someone had written, "You'll come back. They always do." The paper smelled like coffee and wood smoke. I threw it away, changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment. But last night, it snowed, and as I lay in bed, I heard something outside my window, footsteps in the snow, moving in a circle, and whispers, soft but clear, saying my name. I won't look, won't open the curtains, won't check for tracks in the morning. Some circles don't need to be completed. I was 15 when I first heard it. Just another Saturday afternoon at Lake Morrison, practicing my figure skating routines. The ice was perfect that day, smooth, thick, solid under my blades. I'd been skating for 2 hours when the sound started. A low hum, barely audible over the scrape of my skates. At first, I thought it was just the ice settling. We'd learned about that in science class, how pressure and temperature changes could make frozen lakes groan and crack. But this was different. The sound had a rhythm to it, regular pulses, like a heartbeat underwater. I stopped skating and stood still, listening. The hum grew louder without the noise of my blades to cover it. The vibrations came up through the ice, through my skates, into my feet, a steady thrumming that made my teeth ache. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear against the ice. The sound changed. The rhythm shifted into something else, a murmur, like voices having a conversation very far away. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence was unmistakably speech. My breath fogged the ice beneath my face. When it cleared, I saw something move in the darkness below, a shadow sliding beneath the surface. Not fish, it was too big, too solid. The shape glided past, smooth and deliberate, like someone swimming. I scrambled backward. My elbow hit the ice hard enough to send shooting pains up my arm. The shadow passed under me again, closer to the surface this time, close enough to see details. It looked like a person, swimming in slow motion, but that was impossible. The lake had been frozen solid for months. I got to my feet, heart pounding against my ribs. The humming grew louder. The murmuring voices became clearer. They still weren't quite words, but they sounded urgent, like they were trying to tell me something. Another shadow passed beneath my feet, then another. 3 distinct shapes now, moving in patterns under the ice. They left trails in the cloudy darkness, like ink swirling in water. My legs shook. I needed to get off the ice. But as I turned toward shore, something caught my eye. A dark spot in the snow at the edge of the lake. I skated closer, slowly. The humming followed me, vibrating through my blades. The spot was partially buried, something fabric. I dropped to my knees and brushed away the snow. A coat, old, weathered, but still intact. The kind my grandmother would have worn as a teenager. I pulled it free from the snow. A name was embroidered on the collar in faded thread. Emily Morrison. My name. On a coat that looked 60 years old. The humming stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard ice crack. A sharp, wet sound, like someone breaking through a frozen puddle. Then another crack. Closer. I looked down. The shadows had stopped their patterns. All three were directly beneath me now, perfectly still, looking up through the ice. The cracking sounds formed a line, moving toward me from the center of the lake, like something beneath the surface was breaking its way up, step by step. I ran, stumbled over my skate guards, fell hard on the shore. Behind me, the cracking sounds reached the spot where I'd been standing. The ice broke open with a sound like glass shattering. Water splashed. Something surfaced in the hole. I didn't stay to see what it was. I grabbed the coat and ran all the way home. That night I asked my mom about the name on the coat. Her face went pale. "Where did you find that?" she asked. I told her about the lake, left out the humming, the shadows, the breaking ice, just said I'd found it in the snow. She sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. "Emily Morrison was your great-aunt, my father's sister. She disappeared in 1962. They found her skates by the lake, but they never found her body. They thought she'd fallen through the ice." I didn't sleep that night. The coat hung in my closet, dripping melted snow onto my floor. Around midnight I heard it, the same humming from the lake, coming from behind my closet door. I opened it. Water had pooled beneath the coat. In the dim light, I saw something written on the inside collar in the same thread as the name. Numbers, a date. January 15th, 1962. Tomorrow's date. 62 years later. I went back to the lake the next morning. Had to know, had to understand. The ice was smooth again, no sign of the hole from yesterday. I stood at the shore, watching the surface. The shadows were still there, moving in their endless patterns, waiting. The humming started again, louder now. The murmuring voices formed words I could almost understand. Almost, but not quite. I stepped onto the ice. No skates this time, just boots. The vibrations came up through my soles, into my bones. The shadows stopped their patterns, gathered beneath me, three distinct shapes, looking up through the ice. The coat in my hands felt heavier, colder. Water dripped from the sleeves, freezing instantly on the lake's surface. A crack split the air like a gunshot. Then another, and another, coming toward me from the center of the lake. I didn't run this time, stood my ground as the ice broke open in front of me. Water surged upward, something rose to the surface. A hand, blue with cold, reaching up through the hole. Then another hand, a face, my face, but older, much older, frozen in time, preserved in the lake's cold embrace. The humming peaked, the voices became clear, three voices speaking in unison, speaking my name, warning me. I stumbled backward, fell. The ice cracked beneath me. Someone grabbed my arm. A skater who'd seen me fall, pulled me back to shore. "Are you crazy?" she asked. "The ice is too thin there. There's a warm spot in the lake. Everyone knows to avoid it." I looked back. The hole was gone. The shadows were gone. But the humming lingered, fading slowly like a remembered song. I never skated on Lake Morrison again. Gave away my skates, hung the coat in the back of my closet where I wouldn't have to look at it. But every January 15th I hear the humming, feel the vibrations coming up through the floor, and sometimes late at night I catch glimpses of shadows moving under the ice of my bathroom mirror. Three shapes swimming in endless patterns, waiting for another Emily Morrison to join their eternal dance beneath the frozen lake. Last week, my daughter turned 15, asked for ice skates for her birthday. I bought her rollerblades instead. She doesn't understand why I won't let her skate on Lake Morrison. Doesn't know about the coat in my closet, or the shadows under the ice, or the face that rose from the frozen depths, my face, aged by decades in the lake's cold embrace. But sometimes I catch her listening, head cocked like she's hearing something far away. A low hum, a murmur of voices. And I wonder if the lake is calling to her too, trying to add another Morrison to its collection of frozen memories. I should tell her the truth, warn her about what lives beneath that ice. But how do you explain something like that? How do you tell your child that her great-aunt, her mother, and maybe she herself are all part of some endless cycle playing out in the depths of a frozen lake? So I keep quiet, hide the coat, avoid the lake. And every January 15th, I sit up all night, listening to the hum that comes from nowhere and everywhere, waiting for the shadows to finish their dance and return to their cold, dark home beneath the ice. They're still waiting, still swimming their patterns, still calling out with my voice, my aunt's voice, my daughter's voice, all the voices of all the Emily Morrisons who have ever stood on that ice and heard the lake's siren song, waiting for the next Emily to complete the circle. But it won't be my daughter. I'll make sure of that, even if I have to fill in the lake myself.